All right. So it's Saturday morning here in Thailand, and it's Friday evening in the States. And today's topic is going to be about the way people think, and that the way that we'll get started with this is: have you ever heard of the expression that if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day, and if you teach a man to fish, he can eat for his lifetime? Have you heard that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Here's the problem with that. What if the guy doesn't like fish? What if, in fact, he's never had fish? What about, in fact, that fishing is common and people who fish eat fish? And so you're a fisherman and you give him a fish, and he may not like it, so he's not going to learn to fish very well. In fact, you can't teach him to fish unless he really wants to learn to fish. Now that's basically where we're going with all of this, is that the things that people are taught throughout our lives often interfere with our ability to think straight. Why? Because if we're taught to think crooked, we think crooked because that's the habit pattern that we've gotten into. And so let's introduce a topic, and we're going to call the topic belief. And people believe all kinds of things. Everybody here has a few beliefs. We can also call these beliefs opinions. And generally, all the things that we believe have been borrowed or stolen from someone else. That very, very rarely do we make stuff up and then hold to it. We'll make stuff up, and then we'll make some more stuff, and then we'll make some more stuff up, and we've forgotten all about the first thing that we made up. But when we're told something over and over and over again without any evidence at all, it becomes a belief. And believing things is a direct hindrance to being able to see clearly. That in fact, when I was a monk in the United States, I would often deal with Christians. That I was involved with some interreligious stuff because they would invite us, like at Thanksgiving. They wanted all the religions to be there, and so I was the Buddhist that spoke English, and so I got to go places, and invariably they would ask questions about what I believe in. And I developed a very short answer to that. I don't believe in belief. I believe in knowledge. I believe in reality. I believe in investigation. I don't believe in belief. And belief is the one thing that's going to be that does interfere most strongly with the real change model that the Buddha has. Then, in fact, in order to change, we often have to drop our beliefs because reality and seeing reality interferes with what we believe. And so people who have belief systems are hard to change. For instance, it's hard to teach a man to fish if he don't like fish. And maybe he's never had any fish, and he won't even eat the fish that you gave him, never mind teaching him to fish, because his grandfather got sick one time eating fish. And so he won't eat fish because he's afraid of it. Well, if grandfather gets sick off of fish, within a couple of generations, fish are going to be a terrible thing. That in fact, we're going to write rules: thou shalt not eat fish. And I mean, some religions have that kind of stuff. You can't eat, prawns or shellfish or something like that. You can't eat pork here and there. Why? They have these rules, and these rules got started because way back when somebody's grandpa got sick. And so you can't eat it anymore. And these become religious rules because of basically how many generations people have believed it. The longer your time after time after time, generation after generation after generation, the way that people behave and the way that they teach their children are let us say, ingrains it even more. You could say that somehow or another, it kind of gets into our DNA. And the more generations that practice that stuff, the more deeply ingrained in the DNA it gets. Hey, David, good to see you. All right, so there is absolutely no end to beliefs. I will talk about it like this. Reality, as vast as reality is minuscule in comparison to the possible things that people can believe that are not true. Okay? Truth is small, and lies are huge. Let's give an example of that. Michael, how old are you?
29.
All right. Now, I'll ask you again how old you are, but this time lie to me.
Okay. I'm 35.
All right, lie to me again. How old are you?
I'm 22.
Okay, lie to me again. How old are you?
I'm 111.
All right, you haven't even gone anywhere near what I would say. How old are you?
I'm 1 trillion years old.
All right, now we're getting someplace, okay? This is what we mean by grandiosity, okay? We make stuff up, and we teach each other to make stuff up. Let me give you an example of a word. Have you ever heard of the word incredible? Do they use it on the internet? Almost everything that they say is incredible. Well, the funny thing about the word incredible is that it's the announcement that I'm about to lie to you. This is incredible. And then they talk about it. Well, if it's not credible, that means then that it cannot be believed because it's not true. It's not credible. It's got no credibility. Right? And so if what he says is in fact a fact, then it's not incredible. Any way that it is, he's lying to you. So be careful about the kind of words that you use. Otherwise, you will become incredible. So, what then is grandiosity? Grandiosity is making something bigger than it actually is. And that we do that primarily because feeling words don't express our feelings very well. So when I say I'm shy or the girl is shy, we almost always say she's very shy rather than just saying she's shy. We add stuff to it. We make things bigger than they are. Well, if this generation parents teach the children and teach them things are bigger than they actually are, then they grow up and teach their kids even bigger than what they imagined from their parents. And every generation, it builds on it and gets worse and worse and worse. To the point that 2,000 years ago, somebody got sick off of seafood, and now the entire culture can't eat seafood. shell food or whatever. The same thing is true with pork. That one time, thousands of years ago, Grandpa got sick because of uncooked pork. He caught trichinosis, got a great big worm. And here we are 2,000 years later, and more than 1 billion people on planet Earth refuse to eat pork. That's because of this buildup of grandiosity and the possibility of belief, which means we believe things that we have been told. And so, Ross, it's really interesting that you asked the question of where does thought come from? The answer to that is that we're taught to think. What was the very first thought? I don't know. But we do know that animals do some thinking, dogs do some thinking. That in fact, something very interesting that I've noticed about Lucky, who is sitting right here with me, whenever I put the headphones on, if she's anywhere around, she'll come to sit down with me. But if I'm sitting at the computer and I don't have the headphones on, that means that I'm not going to be scratching and loving her and picking on her and petting her. But if I got the headphones on, that means that I'm about to talk to people. How did she figure that out? Was that a thought? Was it a dog thought?
There's in terms of thoughts, there's sometimes, you have these random thoughts that just come out, they just come out of nowhere. And then you have these thoughts where you think you intentionally have made the thought. And is that still an illusion? Is it just all just random, random crazy thoughts? Is it just a phenomena that just continuously happens? And thinking about where they come from is just leading you nowhere.
Well, we have several examples that we can use. One would be Freud talked about it in the sense of free association, that he would have his clients come in and relax and sit on the couch, and he'd have a notepad and he'd take down what they said, and he developed the idea that the free association means that the mind just jumps all over the place. Well, Buddhism has known about that for centuries. We've had this concept of monkey mind, that the monkey mind just jumps and jumps and jumps and jumps. Now, someplace buried in there is some sort of cause-effect relationship. Okay? So, we see a bluebird, and we think of blue, and then we see the sky is blue, and then we want a blue dress, and then we want a red dress, and now we see red. Okay? And there was a logical connection with each one, but by the time you go 3 or 4 steps in, the connection is lost. That in fact, Freud was not able to keep up with the connections. That this is actually an exercise that you can do. The next time that you have a conversation with someone, and that it's close to the end of the conversation, can you back up through the topics that were talked about in that conversation? Can you keep track of what your conversations are? If you can begin to keep track of what happens in a conversation, then that'll give you the basic skills to begin to track what your mind has been doing in the past hour. Because it's just been jumping all over the place. It changes the topic on a regular basis. We'll lay in bed and we'll see something on the internet or on the YouTube, and we see food, and we start thinking about food, and then we think about going to the kitchen, and then we think about, oh, that pot is broken, I've got to go buy a pot, and so we wind up at Sears and Roebuck or wherever we go shopping, and now we're looking at other stuff. And all of that happens while we're sitting there thinking in bed, and we're not even watching the video anymore. The same thing happens when we're reading a book. That we'll read a book, it'll have a line that we like, and we start thinking about it. And now the book is going down here, and the eyes are going right through the book, but the mind has been jumping all over the place, kind of thinking about something that we read 3 or 4 pages ago. This is the monkey mind. Okay? Now, if the monkey mind has a lot of beliefs, then he's going to wind up jumping in and out of his belief systems while he is thinking. Also, all the stuff that we have learned in the association of beliefs will be visited in and out. Okay? So, as the mind is moving around and moving in and out of beliefs, that would actually interfere with being able to think logically. And thinking logically, thinking consistently, this is, by the way, what we could use with the word concentration that's so popular in Buddhism, and think about it instead to be something like consistency. That the mind doesn't jump around, it kind of stays on topic. So when mom tells the kid to concentrate on her homework, what that really means is not for the child to struggle and look like that she's working hard, which is what most concentration looks like. And instead, she's actually able to finish her homework one item at a time because she's staying consistent on the homework. Okay? So the more things that one believes that are not true or has no evidence, the more likely the mind is going to jump around in and out of that belief system. That in fact you could go so far, and this is really the main subject that we can talk about, is our belief, and what we believe in interferes with our reality. What we believe in interferes with our ability to do things correctly. Why? Because belief is something that we have been taught by others, often over and over and over and over again, that often gets in the way of our clear thinking. Which means then that children who are raised in religious households, and I won't define religion, I'll leave it loose for you to understand, but the more religious the household is, then the more stupid the children are. That brilliant people grow up in a household where they're not confined and constricted by a set of beliefs. Or in some cases, if the child is put into some situation like that, he finds ways to get out of the box. He doesn't get trapped in it. Okay? One of the things that I noticed when I was in school in various small towns in South Carolina were that the kids often were pretty stupid. In fact, the more often that they went to church, the more likely they were to be stupid. But I did run across several kids, some of them in higher grades than I were really, really sharp. They were smart. They were mathematicians. They really knew stuff. And guess what? They didn't go to church. So church often puts boxes around the kids. Now, my family was such that my mother was gung-ho Baptist, and her family was. But my dad was not. But he found a way of getting along. In fact, I just remember telling Michael this story the other day about how my dad never taught me anything about religion, never opened the Bible, never told me anything like that. He went to church on every Sunday morning, but his behavior spoke volumes to me. And what was his behavior? He actually, in not just one, but in several churches, he had a system to where he would talk to the preacher to be able to get the preacher's sermons recorded. This is back in the 1950s when recorded sermons were rare. And so every preacher would buy into it. Yeah, I want my sermons recorded. And so my dad would have the machinery in the back room, have the microphones set up in the sanctuary, and then my dad would turn on the tape recorders. And during that time, during the sermon, during that hour of services, he'd go to the bar. And then he would come back to the bar just in time to turn the machine off at the end of the services, because all of that stuff was timed, It was always 11 o'clock in Sunday morning, and it finishes at 12 o'clock. And so every Sunday, he would be in the bar. Actually, in Oklahoma, it was a newsstand, but they sold alcohol in the newsstand. I remember because I was a little kid, and he'd take me with him on many occasions, and I would read the comic books, Little Lulu, and that sort of thing. So what I'm pointing you to here is that my dad interfered directly in a huge way with my religious education. He interfered bigly, and boy, am I glad that he did. He gave me the freedom to experiment, but none of the other kids in town had that freedom. They